Welcome to Sisters in Crime Australia and Murder Monday, when authors talk about their crime craft. I'm Karina Kilmore, a debut crime writer, a journalist, and a committee member of Sisters in Crime. And we've been celebrating women's crime writing since 1991. Before I introduce Sally Hepworth, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Sally, welcome.
Hello, it's so fun to be here. Thank you for having me.
And congratulations for winning the 21st Davitt Award for Best Adult Novel with your domestic thriller, The Good Sister. Huge achievement, with 92 adult novels entered this year. And we loved when you said at the award ceremony that it was still a surprise to you that you were writing crime, and how you always start out with this happy, uplifting premise, but before you know it, you're Googling the best way to bludgeon someone to death. You're a woman after our own heart.
Oh, thank you. I do. I still can't believe it. I feel, nowhere near cool enough to write crime. I'm over here with my red lipstick and, I don't know how that happened, but, I like it. So I think I'm here to stay.
Well, you're definitely here to stay. And you're also a New York Times bestseller and have 7 novels under your belt, including Mother-in-Law, which has been optioned for a TV series by Hollywood actress and producer Amy Poehler. You began your writing career during maternity leave with your first child. Now you have 3 children and have produced a book every year since 2014. That's an amazing achievement. Before we get to the questions, can you please give us your elevator pitch for your soon-to-be-released next novel, The Younger Wife?
Yes, I just found myself, I've got an advanced copy here.
Oh, gorgeous.
This is not the final copy, of course, but it's called The Younger Wife. And I guess, like all of my books, it is about dysfunctional families, which somehow is my favourite subject. And this one in particular is about the Aston family, which is an adult family, a mother, a father, and 2 adult daughters. And their world is blown apart when the father decides to marry a woman who is about the same age as his daughters, even though his wife is still alive and has dementia and is in a nursing home. So this story is told through the eyes of the 2 adult daughters and the soon-to-be younger wife, who is around their age. And it all kicks off in the first chapter at the wedding, where someone, as you mentioned, that I like to do in my books, is bludgeoned to death in the sacristy. And then we step back in time and we try and work out who was bludgeoned to death, who did it, and why. So that's The Younger Wife.
Oh, fantastic. Well, let's get to our questions. These are our favourite questions from our readers. So here we go. We just have a random sort of selection.
Okay.
Ooh, does your main character ever surprise you?
Yes, all the time. And not necessarily in the way that I have heard it being done. I sometimes listen to authors say that their characters, start talking and taking on a life of their own. And I always think, gosh, that sounds so magical. And that sounds, like and for me, I don't feel that in the sense that I'm definitely doing the work. I'm planning it and I'm writing it and I'm creating it. But I do feel like at some point in the many, many drafts that I do, I'm a big drafter, I get to know a character, I get to, further into their backstories, and I realize that any kind of plan that I might have made on a plot level no longer makes any sense, because I, think, well, Rachel wouldn't do that, or Tully wouldn't do that, or, and so it becomes clear to me what they would do and what they wouldn't, even though I never really feel that the characters start talking and telling me, that just sounds too easy. And for me, writing is a painful, difficult, blood pouring kind of exercise, which is quite good for Murder Monday.
That's perfect for Murder Monday. How much of a profile do you do for each character before you write?
No profile, no, nothing as kind of formal as that. I do a lot of planning from a plot perspective, I guess, and I do that in all sorts of different ways. I'm very ADHD in my approach to writing. Everyone, I do it a little bit differently, and I do it in a different system. You know, sometimes I'll use Scrivener, and sometimes I'll use Excel, and sometimes I'll use a notebook and something on my wall. And that planning always tends to be plot driven. And the characters, as I mentioned earlier, are something that evolves through those drafts, because I think, well, who would be best challenged by this plot? You know, something that forces you, maybe the plot might force someone to really come out of their shell and be public, or that would be most challenged by a character that's super shy or agoraphobic or whatnot. So for me, plot comes first and character comes later. I will have a bit of an idea of who they are, but definitely not a character profile. But that's just me. And the more I talk to authors, the more I realize that we're all different. And so I always caution people who listen and they think, oh, Sally Hepworth does it that way. You know, that doesn't mean that's how anyone else should do it. You know, in fact, don't do it the way I do it. It's a messy, disastrous process, and I'm sure there's a better way.
Well, a successful one, but how do you approach representing diverse communities?
That's a great question. And honestly, in the past, I think my books have been too white. And I think that is, and not just too white, too straight, you know, to all of the things that is the reality of the world that I live in. And it's something that I give a lot of thought to and a lot of care I want to spend on it. And in the last book that I wrote, The Good Sister, I went to a diverse area, I suppose, in the case of Fern, who is a neurodiverse character. And that is something that is incredibly close to my heart, having a neurodiverse family. I have ADHD, my son's autistic, my husband's autistic, my daughter has ADHD. And so I felt really primed to be able to step into that world. Even though I'm not autistic and the character of Fern was autistic, I felt like I was able to do that with some authority. Now, to take that to characters of colour, for example, I personally wouldn't write a character, go into the head of a character who was, for example, Black, trans, you know, from a particular minority immigrant group. And that doesn't mean that those characters won't appear on the page, because they can and they should, and they will in my books in future, because I plan to do better at that. But at this point, and I was having a really good chat with my friend Stephen Rowley about this, he said that at the moment he feels like gay, he's a gay white man who's an author, and he said he feels like that now he would be comfortable with anyone writing the character of a gay white man, because they have been able to progress through being a minority, as it were. And he said that now he thinks they've handed the baton to gay people of colour, trans authors, Latinx authors, immigrants who need to be telling their own stories. Yeah. And so I think for now, space needs to be made for those characters to tell their stories. And I would not do that. But from my perspective, my role is to include a diverse cast in my books, and they exist outside of I guess the head of a character. That I need to be able to go into the heads of characters that I understand that are my stories to tell, and they should be surrounded by diverse people. So I think that's such a good question. It's something obviously that I give a lot of thought to, and my thoughts meander on. But it's something that I'll continue to hopefully get better at in my books, and I hope that we all do.
Yeah, and I think also the publishing world is getting better at it too. You know, the people who actually make the decisions about which authors get published and which don't. Yeah, so it's great.
But there's still a ways to go, and I think anyone in publishing will tell you that too. You know, we're getting better, but we're not good enough.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the hardest thing about writing a novel?
Oh,
apart from getting up in the morning.
For me, the hardest part is probably editing. And I love writing the first draft and the second draft. I love anything that is within my control, you know, where I'm still the one making all the decisions and the characters are mine. When the editors and readers start having their say, I love that, and it's a very necessary process because they open our eyes as authors to things that we just hadn't seen. And, you know, I would just be horrified if some of my books had been published without editor eyes on them. But it is a different, it's a different beast to creating, isn't it? It's more, in engineering terms, it's brownfielding instead of greenfielding. You don't just have an open kind of thing where you can build a house. You have, you know, you've got to go in and make changes. And for me, I just find that much less creative and much more like work. And I'm doing it at the moment and I hate it. I just want them to slap a cover on it and put it on the shelf. And I know that would be a terrible idea. And so you have to do the work. But yeah, that's not my favorite bit. I know authors who love the editing process. So again, everyone's different.
Yeah.
That's me.
Terrific. Oh, do you start with plot or character or something else? You've almost partly answered that, but...
With plot, yeah. Plot for me is what gets my juices flowing, and maybe a story question, for example, you know, why would someone kill a mother-in-law, or, you know, why, a really overarching kind of thing that I want to explore. But yeah, it's not, you know, some people have a character that just comes to life. Although actually in The Good Sister, with the character of Fern, she really came to life, and she, in a way, she was more important than the plot as it happens. Yeah. But she was probably the character who came to life the most and the earliest in any of my books. So I suppose both can be true.
Yeah, she did drive a lot of that book, didn't she?
Yeah, she did.
Why is crime so appealing as a genre?
I'm so bad at the why, you know. Yeah. I don't know. I think for me, I really like things to happen. I have ADHD. I like things to happen quickly. I like things to grab my attention. There are lots of reasons why other people who don't have ADHD need that at the moment. People talk about phones and TV shows and how our levels of tolerance for, you know, gruesome things has become quite high. And so we need to keep going more shocking. Maybe it's the millennials who need things to make them feel. I don't know. I think that in general, in fiction, if stakes are high, then we're invested, and what can be higher than life and death. But look, I mean, sometimes life and death can come in different forms, like romance. You know, it's a life or death if these people end up together. So I think as long as the stakes are high, then, you know, it's a good thing.
Yeah. What started you on a life of crime?
Again, I don't. Well, no, I suppose I do know. The mother-in-law was really my first crime book, which I didn't discover was crime until I found it shelved in Dymocks in the crime section. And I thought, oh, look at me, I'm crime. And in that time, it was because my in-laws were staying with me after the birth of my third child, and my father-in-law was really getting on my nerves, and he kept asking me, what is your next book going to be about? And I just had my third child, and that's why they'd come from England and they're staying with us. And I said, I don't, shush, I don't know what it is. All right, just stop asking me. I've got my baby, you know, I'm doing my thing. And he just kept going. And eventually I turned to him and I said, my next book is going to be about a woman who murders her father-in-law. and he laughed. He thought that was funny, you know, annoyingly, because it didn't put him off. And I kind of kept thinking about that. And I thought, you know, what would be cool is a mother-in-law who is murdered. And that appealed to me, not, you know, as a great crime novel idea, but as someone who writes books, I guess, primarily for women, about women, with women protagonists. I thought, gosh, who hasn't wanted to murder their mother-in-law at some point? And, you know, I suppose not everyone has. I've heard of these things recently called a mother-in-law unicorn, and there are mothers-in-law who are really nice. But in general, I have one, as it happens.
Okay.
But I have a terrible father-in-law. I love you, Peter, if you're watching.
Yeah.
So that was how it happened. So again, as I said, I was surprised to find it in crime, because for me, while it absolutely can fit into crime, because there is a crime that meets the criteria, for me, I don't think about genre like most authors, I suppose. I just think this is going to be an exploration into the relationship between mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law, and which is what it was. It just so happened that someone died. So yeah, no, you'd be surprised how little thought I put into most things that I do. They just end up that way, and you know, how fortunate for me, because now I'm talking to you and I'm, you know, part of Sisters in Crime.
And crime is such a broad genre too. You know, it almost encompasses every single novel.
I know, you know? Exactly. Yes. Yep. That's true.
How do you work out plot twists and red herrings?
Well, again, part of that will happen in my planning, which, as I said, is a bit different every time, and sometimes it's more specific than others. But I will say that in this drafting process that I have, almost always things will come up that I hadn't planned, or things that I'd planned I'll realise didn't work. And so it's partly planned, and it's partly that feeling your way through as you go. And I think as authors, we get a really good sense as you're writing. You know, if I get bored, which, as I said, I do very easily, I think, well, something has to happen here. And I often think, I'll be finishing a scene and I'll think, oh, let's just add this little cliffhanger. And I'll think, oh, that could mean this. So, you know, and then it goes in that direction. And so it's a combination of planned and organic and, you know, just on a whim, random things I do to stop myself getting bored, and some of them stick and some of them don't. But yeah, a real combination of those three.
Who are your writing inspirations?
My BFF, Leanne Moriarty, who is not my BFF, unfortunately, but I stalk her mercilessly. And I'm lucky enough to share a publisher with her, and I've met her couple of times, and every time we're going to be in the same room, my publisher says, just dial it down, Sally, you know, because I'm very you know, I try and hug her and do weird stuff like that might get me arrested. But I love her. I'm a huge fan of her work, and I love how she marries the crime with the relationships, you know, without being traditional crime kind of novels. So she's not an influence, well, she's my literary heroine, I suppose. I adore Jane Harper. I mean, can she do anything wrong? I, as a person as well as a writer, you know, writers like we're so spoiled in Australia. Kate Morton is just, you know, just a gift, and you know, and then further afield, there's an American writer called Mary Kubica, who writes fabulous thrillers and twisty kind of psychological books. So yeah, we're just, and I almost read exclusively female writers.
Oh, cool.
Not just because that's what appeals to me, and you know, I haven't run out yet. So, yeah.
What's the best? Oh, we've just had that one. What research did you do for your latest novel, your new novel, coming out in October?
The younger one. Well, I'm trying to think if that's a spoiler. No, I don't think it is. I had the funnest research that I have had, because one of the characters is a kleptomaniac, and I won't say that much about the character, but the research is fascinating. And I say that because it is a diagnosed condition, you know, and it isn't what we think. And I think that's what I found really interesting about it, and that's what I love about research, is that kleptomania, you think, I mean, I find that fascinating. Why would people do that? And you often find it that it can be wealthy people, you know, who don't need to steal, and it's not about the stealing, it's about the impulse control. And often they don't even want the product that they're stealing. It's not about the things, it's about the taking. And, you know, anything like that I can kind of sink my teeth into and read books about and get to understand, it's interesting, juicy stuff, but it also across the board, I think, gives you empathy about human beings, because aren't we so likely to look at someone who's a wealthy woman who's a kleptomaniac? Winona Ryder, I think, was at one point, and you know, and everyone was just up in arms about how someone like her could steal. And you know, it just made no sense to me. I thought it was fascinating, but what you're looking at in that situation is a really unwell woman. You know, no one wants to steal, right? If you're stealing something, you're either mentally unwell, you don't, you know, maybe you're in poverty, maybe you're, you know, and across the board, no one wants to be a bad person. They're doing it for some reason. And once as human beings, and certainly as writers, we can step into that knowledge, you know, we're really able to just crack open our hearts a little bit. And so research is always interesting to me for that. Also, I love the juicy stuff about researching kleptomania.
Yeah. That was juicy, wasn't it? That one.
It really was, yeah.
Sorry, I'm losing my pace. What's your writing routine?
Well, it's different at different times of the year. So there's it's almost seasonal. So the first part of the year is often about kind of doing those final edits, like copy edits and page edits on the book that is going to come out later in the year. The second quarter is about promoting the American version of the book, because I have one book that comes out twice a year. So it comes out in Australia in November, and then it comes out in April in the States. So I do a bit of that promotion in the second quarter, and also writing the new book. Wow. And then the third quarter is about self-editing the new book while promoting in Australia. And then the third quarter, I guess, is about kind of coming up with an idea for the new book. And you're straddling a few books at a time, because there's, you know, you're pitching ideas, working on a book, editing the one, promoting another one. So it's a bit of a, it is my full-time job. So, and alongside all of that is, of course, the administration of running a business, which it is, you know, doing the talks, doing the, getting the invoices in and out, and, you know, doing the competitions, the giveaways, and asking people to blurb, and reading for other people and blurbing them. And it's all of those things, but I love it. And for my brain and the way that it works, to constantly be working on something new and across three things, and I love it, and I feel very lucky, and I enjoy all stages except the editing.
Yes, okay. And our final question for today, Sally, how would you get away with murder?
Oh, okay. So I have thought about this a lot, and I have got usually it's my husband at the moment, because we're in lockdown and have been for 250 days, and bludgeoning, it would be really hard to get away with it. And I don't know what I would, probably a golf club, because that would be, but bad idea. And I've spoken to my homicide detective, what she said is there is a drug that you can put into a pill, like a vitamin, and then what you need to do is get them to take it themselves, and you be a long way away. So then they've kind of poisoned themselves. So the poison goes into the little, you know, if they take a multivitamin. Christian doesn't yet, so I'm going to have to like give him some to take and make him believe that they make him a better golfer. And then as soon as we get out of lockdown, I'm going to grab the kids, hot foot it down the coast, and then leave him here to take it, and then come back, and he'll be dead. So can you just cancel this? Like, if this comes out, the police might know what I've done.
I'll wipe it. Yeah, you're safe with us, Sisters in Crime. Sally Hepworth, thank you for being with us today on Sisters in Crime.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was so fun.